So Joel here is both an attorney and he helps in the acquisitions and merger space, commercial real estate and intellectual property. But he's also the author of two books that caught my eye when he reached out and said hi. And one of them is about. It says, "What's the words exactly? What your attorney should,
Yeah, yeah.
what you should know from your
Where
attorney."
I'm from, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Um, Went to school, went to college out in Utah, went to law school at William and Mary in Virginia, and have stayed in Virginia since then. Practiced law with some very large law firms for about 11 years, 12 years, and then started my own practice about 18 years ago. And I'm just by myself. And I just focus on doing deals for people. So I do lots of small business merger and acquisition work. I do a lot of commercial real estate work. A lot of times that commercial real estate work is kind of related to or associated with the M&A work. And then I just advise people on lots of operational issues like contracts that they're going to enter into with vendors or consultants or things like that. So that's where I spend most of my time. I don't go to court. That was actually a goal of mine when I decided to go to law school. Was I wanted to be a transactional attorney. I didn't want to be a trial attorney, and it's worked out really well for me. What gets me going is my kids. I have four sons. Their ages between 18 and 30 years old. So we've had we love to do things outdoors and be active and sports and just be together. And so that's really kind of my why. That's why I do what I do and what gets me going. I've done some volunteer work in the past. I actually really enjoy working with teenagers and exposing them to maybe that's not the right word, but but introducing them to outdoor activities like mountain biking or skateboarding, things that we love to, or being on the river. I like to canoe as well and kayak. So those kinds of things. I love kind of being outdoors and being with a group of people who perhaps have not done it before, but who, as they go through the experience, it kind of, broadens their horizons, maybe inspires them to take up a new hobby or something like that. And maybe inspires them to face some other challenges in their lives as well. So that's kind of who I am, I think, in a nutshell. You're as young as you feel, I think. And
Right.
I mean,
I'm only
I'm going to be 57 this year, and I still go skateboarding a couple times a week with my 18-year-old son. So,
so.
it's always the oldest guy at the skate park.
So
So,
that's fun. I actually skated as a teen, but I don't think I've been on a skateboard since my 20s. Things that we should know before we get into buying or selling a small business.
I think that's a wonderful question, and that's really one of the main reasons why I wrote the book was because a lot of the people that I'm dealing with, it's their first time having a merger and acquisition experience, either their first time buying a small business or their first time selling a small business. And a lot of people I've come to see over the years have felt like perhaps it's just an event. Like they agree in principle, the buyer and the seller, and then they're just like, okay, let's just close it. What's the big deal? But it really is a process. And I wanted to have a book that I could give people that kind of explains the process. I can't ever say that I can speak completely in layman's terms, but I try and be as clear as a lawyer can be, perhaps, to help explain that process and some of the major issues that people will encounter during, in the process. So I think that, one of the things that people are surprised at is how many pieces there are to the puzzle. And I want people to know what all the pieces are and how they're going to get put together, because it does take time to put the puzzle together, to put the deal together. Go ahead.
And a lot of this question, what's one myth or one thing that's out there in the industry you wish just didn't exist, right? A common in the buying and selling of business, there's a lot of stuff that's out there.
Well, I'm a little biased, but I think one of the myths is that the lawyers are going to screw the deal up. Now, that's not to say that that doesn't happen. And I want to try and be real polite to my colleagues, but I've been doing M&A deals for almost 30 years now,
Right.
and but I do know that there are a lot of attorneys who think that doing an M&A deal for a small business is like is not a big deal. It's easy. They think it's easy, and so you'll have lawyers who aren't experienced in the M&A setting take on a deal, and I'll be very candid. A lot of trial attorneys do deals, and that it's if they don't understand the process and they don't understand how to prioritize the issues and to filter out things that really aren't that big of a deal, and then bring the most significant things to the top and resolve those things, then they can kind of get in the way of the deal. And so, but the overall myth is, if you find, if you do find an attorney who has the experience, they're not going to screw the deal up for you. They should be able to help you with the deal, help you through the deal. Well, I think you bring out two really important things. One is a question that I get asked all the time: is when do you bring the attorney into the deal? What's the right timing? And I still search for an answer, a real specific answer to that question. But in some instances, bringing me in toward the end of the deal is just perfectly fine. But in other instances, it might be good to at least have me involved in a limited role. Part of your role as the client is to help manage the deal, and part of managing the deal is managing the professionals, the lawyer, and if you involve a CPA, a business valuation company, things like that. And so the more you know about how to work with those people, the better, because I like to feel like I'm on your team. I don't want to be necessarily the star point guard or something like that. I just want to be, I'm on your team. I want you to feel comfortable talking to me. I want you to feel like you can, use me as much or as little as you want, and that you're not going to get, kind of billed to death on things. And so listening to your experience helps me understand that you have already kind of decided on, you've worked with enough lawyers, you've worked on enough deals, but the person who's going to do it for the first time is it's a little harder to answer that question for them, because they don't have that experience managing a lawyer.
So
I think lawyers are like shoes too, right? You got to find the right fit. You don't want to, for lack of a better analogy, you don't want to buy a Gucci loafer when all you need is a flip flop or something like that. I shouldn't say that's too extreme, but I mean, lawyers come in different shapes and sizes, and what I mean by that is not their physical appearance, but their experience, the industries that they've worked with, the size of law firm that they're in, their billable hour rate, things like that. And so I hate to, I've got a deal in right now I almost hesitate even taking, because the purchase price is only like $60,000, but I still have to do the same amount of work. And so, we talk about fees and things like that, but they don't need, for example, if they had gone to a 500 attorney law firm for that kind of a deal, that wouldn't be a good fit. No, not at all. I'm a much better fit. But likewise, I had a client that I helped start up and have worked with them operationally for 25 years. And last year they came to me and they said, we've got an offer to sell. It's going to be a approximately $30 million purchase price. We need to close in 3 weeks, and everything that's going to be transferred essentially are government contracts. And I said, yeah, you need to hire a different law firm for that. Someone who has got all that experience with the transferring government contracts, and who can put 5 to 10 lawyers on this, so that you could do all the due diligence and close the deal within that time frame. And they did it. They found a firm that was able to get through all that, and they closed in 3 weeks, which is pretty amazing to me.
helps me pull stuff apart and put it back together when I need her.
Mhm.
Right. So you know, what other areas, as an attorney, what other areas along the deal, like, man, you really should have a professional look at, X.
I think I mean, certainly a CPA, a lawyer, and then depending on the industry, you might need some subject matter experts. Um, so, for example, if you're going to buy a convenience store that has gas pumps out in front of it, you're definitely want to have an environmental engineer come in and do at least a phase one environmental site assessment, because there's a large risk there when you buy, even if you do an asset deal. When you buy that convenience store, you're going to become the successor to the environmental liabilities on the property. The asset deal is not going to shield you from that just because of the way the laws are written. Again, subject matter experts, if you're in certain types of industries. And, of course, if you're going to finance the deal with a commercial bank, then you want to have a loan officer who's in the deal toward the beginning so that you can help understand what kind of money is going to be available to you and how, you want to get them comfortable with the deal sooner rather than later. I spent the first 3 years of my career as an environmental lawyer, representing mostly like large companies, Fortune 500 companies, and helping them with compliance issues. And so we were looking at large manufacturing facilities, doing a lot of auditing and things like that. But it is scary if you get, from my perspective, if you have to go to a phase two, in other words, you do the phase one site assessment and the environmental consultant says, hey, this property appears to be so dirty that we need to take core samples and send them to a lab. In a small M&A deal, you're probably at a threshold where you seriously want to think about looking for a different deal, because it's almost, I don't want to say it's impossible to mitigate those liabilities, but it's very difficult. And there are creative ways to do it. So, for example, if you can convince the seller to put a significant portion of the purchase price in escrow, so that if you do have to do some cleanup, within a year, the seller is going to stick around for a long time and has a lot of financial resources that you can get to. There may be some creative insurance products out there. I just don't, that's an area I don't know too much about, but there aren't a lot of ways to, that's why I say it's probably better to focus your creative energy on finding a different deal.
That's exactly what I told him. I was like, number one, it's California. Number two,
Oh yeah,
they're already doing core samples. You're not getting away from that. If you've
right.
ever seen what they do to mediate that, they pull the soil off and haul it off or whatever,
Yeah.
It could be very expensive, right? You
Oh
could
yeah,
have to
absolutely.
dig a
Disorder. I certainly could do deals like that, but I haven't really seen that done here. Most of my real estate work is, for example, you talk about a collection of dental offices. I may help a dentist. In fact, I'm working with a dentist right now who sold his practice and now is selling his dental office. The real estate is sitting empty right now, but he's selling it to another dentist. So my transactions are typically on the the one building at a time kind of. Now, I did do a deal a couple of years ago, and I think this is a little bit more common for me. And so there are kind of local practices as well, and I don't know if it's different elsewhere, but that's typically a lot of what I see around here.
on mergers and acquisitions and stuff that you enjoy. Like, what are you curious about inside of the space? You've written books on it, so
Mhm.
what areas are you most interested in?
I'd like to, I guess, see other people's light bulbs come on, and I like to, I'm doing a deal before I got on with you today. I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with one of my clients who is, we're selling off an interest in a company, and we're trying to come up with a creative way to do it, and we bounced ideas off of each other, and eventually, I came up with two ideas and that we hadn't thought of before. But I love that kind of that intellectual exercise of working with my clients, bouncing ideas off of each other and trying to figure out a way to help them accomplish their objectives. Yeah, I mean, it's from what I like about the M&A space is sometimes I tell people a big role of me as a lawyer is to be a project manager. And I love to have my checklist of 70 to 100 items and to kind of put all those pieces of the puzzle together at the time they need to be put together so that we walk into closing and we're ready to go. Yeah, I mean, it's,
Things I like to ask is, what should I be asking you? All right, as both of us in the mergers and
yeah.
acquisitions world, what should we be talking about so that the listeners who may be either buying or selling a business, they get the most value.
Yeah, I think the three things that I want my clients to ask me, and if they don't ask me, I'll bring it up. I want them to ask me, what are the biggest issues I should be looking out for in my deal? The second thing I want them to ask me is, how long is it going to take? And the third thing is, how much is it going to cost me? What are your fees going to be? And maybe what should I expect as far as other costs and expenses that I'm going to incur? I think if you're armed with those, especially if you're on the buyer side, if you're armed with those answers to those three questions, I think you'll feel a lot better about, as the deal progresses through the process. If you tell me that your buyer is a P&E firm out of New York City and they're going to have a large New York law firm involved, it's going to take more time and it's going to cost more money because they're going to lawyer the thing to death, frankly.
Right.
And then fees from a lawyer's perspective, I've done enough deals that if you can tell me the answers to those other questions, who the lawyers are, what the purchase price is, I can give you a pretty good idea of what my fees are going to be. So.
And a lot of stuff just goes away because I just don't want
Yeah.
to mess with them.
Yeah.
I won't say
No,
who it is here, but anyway, it's
that's okay. No, I have guys like that locally that I
yeah.
refer. If I have a client who has a problem, then yeah, absolutely have two or three guys like that. And they likewise, if they, if somebody approaches them and says, we've got this little thing, that a lot of times they'll send it over to me and say, Joel, see if you can negotiate a resolution to this. And if you can't, then kick it back to us and we'll get the big guns out. So yeah, I mean, easy ways to reach me. I have a website, so it's just my name, joelankney.com. We'll get you to my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I respond pretty quickly to people. If you want my books, they're on Amazon. They're on Audible. If you want an audio book, I have a very distinctive last name, so it's not hard to find me. Typically, if you just Google my name, I'm going to be the only one who pops up. So.
Let's think real quick. Is there anything I missed? I mean, is there something we should have just covered in this time frame, or something you just you feel like, man, I wish we would have talked about?
I think that we have touched on a lot of issues and they've been really good. And I think that one of the things that I see sometimes, and I think we've kind of danced around this issue, is that it's really good to do, as you're preparing to do an acquisition or a sale, that part of that preparation includes learning how to work with a lawyer, learning what the lawyer's role is, learning perhaps, what you can get out of a lawyer and what to expect when you work with a lawyer. I think that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is because I wanted people to feel prepared when they came in to talk to me.